Okay, so let's talk about some problems clearly that we have with fossil fuels. Number one, we know since this is a non-renewable source of energy, it is not renewable in our lifetime. It is in relatively short supply. Okay, as much as we are producing more, for example, oil than ever here in the United States, we still anticipate that it's not going to be an exceptionally long time that we're going to have these resources on our planet, considering our consumption. Okay, like I said, here in the United States, we flattened out in terms of our petroleum use, but again, we're definitely still extracting way more than is regenerated on the planet. Okay, estimates are only about half a century or more in terms of oil or natural gas. Certainly, we are not thinking post 100 years at our current rate of use. And certainly when we think about coal, I should say with China, their obvious consumption is going to be increasing as they continue to become developed. And I would say even with India, the same situation as well. Okay, when we think about political concerns, we have a hard time being dependent on other countries for things. Clearly, we're doing really well becoming more oil independent of other countries, but historically, it's caused a lot of tensions, and we like to control things that happen here in the United States and have control of our energy supply. We don't want to be dependent and vulnerable and relying on other countries for that. So it can cause some tensions with other countries. Certainly Canada is anxious for the Keystone Pipeline. There's been a lot of pushback by the U.S. on the pipeline. So it does cause some tensions there when we're trying to kind of work together to kind of prepare for our energy future, but have obviously different viewpoints in terms of how to achieve that. When we think about fossil fuels, we often think about political concerns related to them, whether it's related to climate change, whether it's related to pipelines crossing state borders, whether it's related to the imports of oil from other countries. These do make us a little bit concerned from our country's perspective, whether it's within our borders, or whether it's with other countries, whether it's Canada or our Middle Eastern countries. Sometimes we think we have major concerns related to our fossil fuel use. Looking back in history, we think about our oil imports and those concerns. Dealing with our Middle Eastern countries on our planet has been a bone of contention, so to speak, for us, where these countries are somewhat unstable, putting it mildly, and trying to kind of walk that tightrope to make sure that we are keeping reasonable relationships with countries that we need oil from without necessarily agreeing with their policies and their treatment for people and human rights. And so it's a really big issue for us to have to manage this need with these countries that we need to get our energy from. In terms of the pipeline, the XL extension, there have been a lot of debates about putting new pipelines in. There are many people who think that it's time for us instead to be extracting different types of oils. Maybe we need to be thinking towards the future in terms of energy, getting our energy without the use of fossil fuels. So we are at that point here in the United States where we're kind of in this transition period where we think it's time to make that change. But that change is going to take an extended period of time. So some people think it's time we need to just say no to pipelines. Let's stop moving it all over the place. Let's start, producing energy closer to home, energy that is maybe cleaner and renewable. and back off and not make these huge investments in pipelines and transportation for oil. The other controversy, there's a lot of controversies specifically about the Keystone Pipeline, or the XL, the extension of the Keystone. And that is to move oil, that tar sands oil, from Alberta, Canada. Okay, clearly we think it would be better to get our oil from Canada than the Middle East. So a lot of proponents say that would be a great idea. Let's just get it from Canada. We have a really good relationship with them. Let's change this pipeline and extend it from Alberta down through Nebraska, and then extend it all the way from Oklahoma to Texas, where we can refine it. Okay, we can continue to retrofit our refineries to deal with that, and then we can, then parcel that oil out to our states for use. So a lot of people think that's a really good idea, but it's been hung up in the courts for years because of the pipeline going through what's called the Ogallala Aquifer. And you'll see that in Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma. It is the largest aquifer in the world, and it supplies people with a lot of their drinking water in that region. It also supplies water for irrigation. So there are a lot of concerns related to water contamination. And when we talk about this type of oil, this is the type of oil that's spilt in the Kalamazoo River. It is tar sands oil, and just from the name you can think about it being different than our traditional crude. It is a thicker, more dense oil, and it sinks in water. So the concerns related to some kind of pipeline problem near the aquifer, that's a big concern for people. And so it has been, President Obama had taken it off the table. He said, we are not going to do this right now. This is not a good answer. We are having major issues here. There's another pipeline concern that's up in the Dakotas, where currently Native Americans are saying that the pipeline is supposed to go through native lands and sacred areas, and it's also going to go under their source of water, under their river that they get their water from. And that's again been stalled and put on hold because of these contamination concerns. Will there be an issue? We are very concerned about our freshwater resources here in the United States, and we do not need any of those freshwater bodies to become contaminated. So there's a lot of political backlash. Certainly people who have been, have these concerns related to their freshwater resources have stood up and said, this is not the route we want to take right now. Can we do something different? Can we divert this? Can we move this pipeline, so it doesn't affect these tribes' water resources? So that's kind of on the being more researched now. And then obviously the XL extension has been vetoed for now. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, that can change, okay, dependent on, obviously, the leadership here in the United States and how they decide to, change that decision and allow the pipeline extension to go forward or not. So when some people think, we're in terms of climate change, that's another big concern. Should we be continuing to expand the use of these resources, this dirtier oil? Should we be spending all this money to, retrofit our refineries? Because we know that burning our fossil fuels is contributing to climate change, and should we continue to do that is a big concern. I have a whole slide here devoted to pollution concerns from fossil fuels. Clearly, there are a lot of concerns about everything from extraction to refining to burning, okay, to transport. We have a lot of issues with our fossil fuel industry, okay, in terms of environmental concerns. We think about, when we think about oil spills, we think about the big ones. We think about the Exxon Valdez in 1989. We think about the Deepwater Horizon explosion, just 5 years ago. The habitat alteration that that is affected, okay, by oil spills, whether it is these big spills or just kind of the daily spills that happen, whether they're on land, okay, from a pipeline explosion, our streams or our rivers like the Kalamazoo, or our oceans, okay, all right, if we think about, up by Alaska with the Exxon Valdez or the Gulf of Mexico. All right, these oil spills are significant, and they are long-lasting. They have long-lasting negative impacts. Okay, so we see the oil-slicked birds. We know that their habitats have been altered. We know wildlife and the biodiversity gets affected by these oil spills. Okay, it is significant. Okay, environmentally, it is a big deal. We think about water pollution in terms of extraction, whether it's from fracking, whether it's from, again, these spills. These are a big concern. All right, when we burn fossil fuels, clearly we create air pollutants, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. All right, we know when carbon dioxide goes up into the atmosphere, it is a greenhouse gas, and therefore it traps additional heat, leading to our climate's slow warming. Basically we talk about that being global warming, but leading to climate change, where we will see in the future, and we're already seeing some of these impacts, changes in climates throughout the world. Okay, so that that doesn't mean necessarily that everybody's going to get warmer or 3 degrees warmer. It just means that some places will get warmer, some places will get colder, some places will have more drought, some places will have more rain. Climates are very complicated, and they have a lot of they're multifaceted, and we anticipate with a warming global temperature, those climates will shift throughout the world. All right, clearly with pollution, we get concerned about human health, if our air is polluted, if we have water pollutants. When we burn fossil fuels, they release what we call volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and they are cancer-causing, and they also contribute significantly to other air pollution issues, including tropospheric ozone, which we'll talk about when we talk about air quality. When we think about carbon dioxide as well, we think about carbonic acid redepositing itself on Earth in the form of acid rain or acid snow. And with increased carbon in the atmosphere, we are seeing our oceans become more acidic because they are absorbing some of that carbon pollution. Okay, so there's probably more things that you can think about in terms of pollution. It is significant and concerning, and it has been for a very long time. The idea is that, do we want to continue to develop these things? Do we want to continue to do extraction and offshore drilling and fracking, or are we going to make a significant shift over to cleaner renewable energy? Okay, as we kind of go through all of these sources of power, from our fossil fuels to our nuclear power to our other renewables, keep in mind that each one of them is going to have positive aspects and negative aspects. Fossil fuels, we've been doing them for a long time. They produce a lot of power for us, relatively efficient, and they have a lot of downfalls, okay, but I don't want to say that they do not have some, positives. We have the infrastructure set up for them, okay, so in that sense, there are some positives. The same thing's going to be true for nuclear energy. Okay, when we flip over to our renewable conversation, keep in mind that there's no perfect renewable, okay, there's some good and there's some bad with every single source of energy that we talk about. So we know that there's a lot of challenges with fossil fuels, but I don't want you to think that there isn't, another side to that picture. All right, kind of looking at emissions. We know that throughout history in the last couple hundred years, our use of fossil fuels has dramatically increased. And when we kind of look at oil, natural gas, and coal use, obviously, between the year 1900 and 2000, only 100 years, it has just climbed just exponentially, okay, in the use of all of them. So we release just so much carbon dioxide, way more than clearly we ever have in history. Okay, so you may have heard about clean coal technology. All right, we know coal is what our dirtiest of our fossil fuels. We've just been trying to burn it cleaner, and obviously there's new restrictions in terms of how much mercury can be released because of the obvious concerns about mercury. The EPA has established new regulations on that, and the coal industry has installed a lot of scrubbers on their smokestacks, trying to decrease the amount of air pollutants that are released from those stacks. But coal is not clean. We're trying to burn it cleaner, but it's a challenge, okay, to get it really cleaned up and not emitting as much pollution. Okay, certainly, you hear about them trying to, figure out how to sequester the pollutants underground. Okay, but obviously that could lead to other concerns. Trying to build zero-emission coal-fired power plants, but that is a very difficult thing to do since we're burning organic matter. So the engineers are on it. They're trying to figure out better ways to do it since we have coal reserves. Is there a better way to clean it up so that we can use it without negatively impacting our air quality? Okay, the other thing I want to talk to you about on this slide is fracturing, or fracking, it's often called. And basically fracking is the breaking of rock formations underground and pumping up either the oil or the natural gas that is below the Earth's surface. Okay, historically we've done this. We've gone below ground and pumped up petroleum out of the earth. But this is basically what's happening is we're doing this what's called horizontal fracturing, where we'll drill down vertically and then across horizontally to take a better advantage of more area under the ground instead of just going straight down, actually going down and over to have to drill down less. Okay, so reaching more area under the earth. And basically what happens is they pump water with chemicals in it into cracks in the rock, okay, and that can release petroleum or natural gas, and it's extracted up and out. It uses a lot of water in this process, and fracking companies, the oil and natural gas companies, are not required to disclose the chemicals that they are using when in this extraction process. So they say it's proprietary and it is private, and they do not need to disclose it because other companies may know their secrets then. But now, of course, the EPA and Clean Water Act is kind of coming around to say, to make requirements for them to disclose that information, because if it's a concern about what is in there, what's going into the ground, what could potential groundwater be contaminated, what would it be contaminated with, people are certainly concerned about what is going in there. Is that going to end up in my well? Is that going to end up in our our water resources? People want to know. So I think it won't be too long. We'll start to see these kinds of changes happening. Again, new regulations on them because of kind of a newer technology that hasn't previously been regulated. All right, there are concerns certainly with fracturing. One is potential groundwater contamination. Certainly you can see online videos of people lighting their water on fire that live in fracking areas. In Ohio, there's been kind of a lawsuit from residents to these companies that are fracking because they say their water is contaminated. and they can light it. It's flammable, okay, and it has these, it has, natural gas in it, or has petroleum, so it's ignitable. And clearly that is a huge concern for people's water, because they can't consume it. It's not potable, and that there's no reason that should be coming out of their wells. So there's different areas around the country that have sued the oil and natural gas companies, and that's kind of a difficult fight to take on, but they are doing it because clearly they've been negatively impacted by fracking, and the oil and natural gas companies say that they're not responsible for that, and that's kind of where that controversy is. Okay, so that's kind of where we are with that. In addition, I have a link to just a little NBC News clip. You can take a look at. There are definitely concerns about earthquakes related to fracking. Okay, pumping this water and chemicals into the earth to break the rock, and then basically this water is then injected into the earth in these what we call injection wells. And as you can probably imagine, there could be concerns when you're pumping something into the earth that there could be earthquakes involved. And you can watch the little video clip about the Oklahoma earthquakes, where there was only a couple reported here and there, and then in the last couple of years there's hundreds of earthquakes. And finally the U.S. Geologic Service is saying that it's these earthquakes are related to fracking, and of course the industry says they're not, but now the Geologic Service is saying they've studied it and it's linked to fracking. So there are some negative concerns, but clearly that's where we are right now. Fracturing is a huge deal. Fracking is being done all over our country, and we are benefiting from it in the sense that we are producing more of our energy needs here than we ever have. Okay, so we are meeting a lot of those needs by doing this process, but at what cost? Okay, do the benefits outweigh the cost? So take a look at that earthquake video. It's pretty good, just to give you an idea about kind of what's going on with fracking. Okay, on this slide you can kind of see how the hydraulic fracturing is done. You can see the top, of that injection platform. Okay, at the top, the water that's mixed with sand and other chemicals, it's pumped into the well. Okay, the energy from the highly pressured fluid creates channels in the rocks to release to trap natural gas. So you see it kind of breaking apart. You see how it goes down vertical and then over horizontal, like I mentioned. Okay, the natural gas flows out of the well and into the storage tanks. The recovered water is stored in open pits and then delivered to a treatment facility. Sometimes, like I said before, it is in these they re-inject the wastewater into the earth, and can cause other issues. Okay, so again, it just depends on which site they're working at, or what the company is, and what they do with that wastewater. Okay, so you can just take a look at that. That gives you kind of an idea of how that works. Okay, on the left you can see the different fracking platforms. You can see them kind of spaced together next to each other with little roads in between. Okay, that kind of looks, like where you would drill for oil. Same idea, drilling down and then again horizontally under the ground. And then on the right, you don't see a lot of aerial views, but I did find this one of fracking fields where you can see all those little individual square platforms connected by little roads around it. And it's really, way more widespread than we think about. Okay, you might not, really notice them around where you are, but there are fracking fields in Michigan, and most states around the country do have some fracking. Some obviously more than others, like Ohio and Oklahoma and the Dakotas, but yeah, it's more common than we kind of know about, and it will continue because, like I said, it's really supplying a lot of our energy needs here in the United States.